Welcome to Frank Wealth Insights, a financial and investment podcast from Return on Life Wealth Partners. They look at your money. We look at your life at returnonlifewealth.com.
Welcome to Frank Wealth Insights. I am your host, Frank Fantozzi, President and founder of Return on Life Wealth Partners. We help you achieve a life well lived. It's hard to believe our 30th anniversary party is fast approaching on August 1st, and we look forward to celebrating with those who have helped us make this all possible. Our clients, our team, and our strategic business partners, as well as my family's support. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about a great topic of interest to many people, and I am joined by one of our teammates, Senior Advisor Chelsea Hussey. We are going to talk about a second home, a vacation home, people that dream about that when they go on vacation. But many people always want to look at this in a manner where they can tie it into making it an investment property to help finance it. So there's a lot of moving parts when you combine the personal use with its business use.
Yeah, it's a great and perfect topic, I think, for the summertime, Frank. When you're considering the purchase of a second home that serves as both a personal retreat and an investment property, it's crucial to be aware of various do's and don'ts, opportunities, pitfalls, and tax implications.
Yeah, Chelsea, it's always hard when you take an idea and you want it to achieve a dual goal. In this case, we're talking about finding a property, a safe haven, a place to get away with your family, call it a family compound. And even some people look at a vacation home as possibly a retirement home, eventually leaving, in this case, northeastern Ohio to go someplace warmer like the Carolinas or Georgia or even Florida. But when you combine the elements of trying to make it a great investment, sometimes those can be very, very competing topics. So it does make it a little more convoluted, and our hope today is to kind of go through some of the key issues that you should be thinking about, because everyone's situation is going to be very different. Every property is going to be very different, but making you aware of the things that you should be going through in your mind, like a quick checklist, will help you navigate these waters, because buying a second home, especially in an ideal place, is not usually an inexpensive proposition.
Well, I think that takes us right to our first question. Is owning a second home or vacation home a good investment strategy?
Well, it can be. I guess it comes down to all the little decisions that you need to make along the way. And I think maybe separating it into a couple categories might help our viewers to understand what they need to think about. So clearly, when you look at it from an investment standpoint, you're looking for all the financial benefits: rental income, property appreciation, maybe even diversification from some of the other assets that you might have, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But then you need to think about your personal use benefits, vacation savings, family retreat, is it a lifestyle enhancement, things like that. So those are things that you're going to have to start weighing out, and we need to really dive into that a little bit to kind of make sure that these topics are well thought through and making sure that you don't overlook some key point that really financially could be of harm to you. But more importantly, when you sink the amount of time and money into a second home or a vacation property, it could be very expensive to make a change.
Sure. How would you summarize the greatest potential financial benefits and also some of the greatest risks to owning a second home?
Well, I think when you think about it, when you go to the places that you want to go to, everybody else wants to go there. So in real estate, they say God only made so much real estate. And when you try to look at those key areas, they're in high demand. So when you think about buying a second home and you look at places like in Florida, especially as you get closer to water, in any of these key locations, the price point to get in, it could actually be more expensive than your primary home, especially if you're coming up from the Midwest. So those are some of the key considerations. Is getting into a second home or vacation home can have high upfront costs. So that means significant down payment, and then on top of that, you have to think about like I'm advising my young daughter who's looking to buy a new home. There's a cost of acquiring a home, but then there's a cost of maintaining and upkeeping that home.
That makes a lot of sense. Have you run into many clients? I know I see this a lot in my generation, but clients who think, well, there's these high upfront costs or all these costs associated with a second home, but would it be wise to offset that by making it an Airbnb or a vacation property?
Well, that's the I think the premise we're looking at here is for people in a certain financial situation, they're not usually contemplating having a second home as an investment property. I mean, it is an investment because it's an asset on their balance sheet, but they're not looking to make money on it. Why? A lot of people don't like the idea of sharing a home. This is my home. This is my second home. When I want to go there, I don't want to have a bed that's been slept in by other people or furniture that's been used, and you have to deal with all the headaches of people that are using that. So, the thing we're not going to focus on today is those that are looking at buying, a vacation home purely as a second home, because there's really no, outside of doing the due diligence, and I think maybe we should cover that for a second, because a lot of the key components of buying just a second home for a second home purpose versus a second home that could be an investment property, there are some common due diligence that you need to go through. So people are often very familiar where, think about it, you live in northeastern Ohio, and I'm looking to go from the east side of northeastern Ohio to the west side. So you're still familiar with northeastern Ohio, but you still need to get familiar with the area that you're thinking of moving to. Now, that problem becomes compounded when I have to leave and go to another state. So if I go to Florida, and let's just focus on Florida, there are different rules. There's association rules, there's state rules, there's city rules. You're not familiar with the city. So often we tell clients that are contemplating this to really spend some significant vacation time there, to the point where you start to know the customs of the local people, the type of people that reside there. It's amazing, and when you look at Florida, a lot of the Midwest individuals that have second homes tend to go to the West Coast, where the New Yorkers, the people from Massachusetts tend to go on the East Coast. Well, there are people, and they're all good people, but they have, different values and different ways they look at things. So every city you look at is going to be very, very different. And especially if you're looking at this to be a maybe a retirement home, do they have the hospital systems that you want? Do they have the amenities that you would like to have? These are all things that you would look at when you buy a normal home. It becomes a little trickier because now you're going to a city that you're not familiar. So enlisting usually a real estate agent is going to be very, very helpful. So on that stage, buying a second home just as a vacation home versus a second home as a vacation home investment property usually have a lot of the commonalities, because you have to go through and do that type of due diligence. Home inspections, for example. Those are all things that you need to think about when you go and look at those different locations. So from that standpoint, I think there's a lot of commonality in regards to that. And the other thing is, what does the future population look like? You might move in a time where this bustling little town is just a little town, but then in 15 years, because everyone's bragging about this is a great place to vacation, now it becomes overcrowded. So those are things that you need to plan out. You need to look at things like insurance. When you go to places like Florida, where natural disasters are much more significant than what we have in the Midwest, insurance becomes a little more difficult. There's safety and security issues. Will the need of the house continue to meet your needs today? So you buy it today to fit your family needs, but as you consider this as a family compound, if your family grows, are you going to have to think about upgrading that home? So it is a long-term commitment of time, potential resale considerations, and you need to think about exit strategies if things change for you and your family. So these are more what I call personal areas that you need to really think through before you even start to get to the financial part and saying, okay, am I going to treat this just as a vacation home or as a rental property, or as you mentioned, an Airbnb?
Is there any rule of thumb as far as maintenance goes, or what somebody should incorporate in their financial plan when they're thinking about maintaining a home? So let's say I'm purchasing a home in Florida. I obviously need to take insurance into account. Is there a sort of, like I said, rule of thumb or estimated budget for how much, like let's say 2 or 3% of the property value that I should plan to allocate each year towards maintaining the property?
Yeah, rule of thumbs, I would wish I could come up with a rule of thumb, but every location and every property and everyone's personal situation is different. So I tend to be a little more of a cash flow spreadsheet kind of guy. And so things that you don't want to do, you don't want to overestimate your rental income. So a lot of real estate agents say, well, all these properties are generating X dollars per month, and here's the rental season. and this is what you should be able to count on. Well, I like to assume things much more conservative because, again, I'm competing against other homes. And think about it, when the economy isn't going well, are people taking as many vacations? Because when things get very expensive, the hotel business suffers too because people aren't traveling as much. So don't overestimate your rental income. You can't neglect the maintenance costs. And think about it from a management standpoint. So that's another decision we didn't talk about, is if you're thinking about renting, okay, you're a landlord now.
Yeah.
So you are responsible for the upkeep of that house. Every time someone vacations at your home, you have to make sure it's clean and ready for the next guest. And the pool has to be cared for, and the electricity and the water softener and the hot water tank. All that stuff is your responsibility. So when you go and think about it, if you go to rent someplace, whether it's a hotel, house, and you go out to use the grill in the back of the house because it's an Airbnb, and they said, oh yeah, we have propane there, there's no propane, who are you going to call?
That's a good point.
Right? So they're going to be calling you. So one of the decisions you have to make is, do you want to be the landlord, or are you going to delegate this to a management company? Well, management companies are not 501c3 charities. They're in there to do business. So that's an additional cost. We mentioned insurance, and in places that are much more victim to hurricanes and things like that, natural disasters, your insurance costs are going to be a lot higher. And then you're usually going to have some form of legal and accounting advice, because now your vacation/rental home is a little business. And because it's a little business, it has to be treated as such. So you might need to incorporate because you want to protect yourself. So you might have to set up a limited liability company, then decide, am I going to be taxed as an S corporation or a partnership? So now you have to go out and spend money to work with an accountant. And then, are you going to do your tax return? Now, maybe before you could because it was just a W-2. Now you have to deal with the fact that, you have a rental property to deal with. How is that all going to play? So these are all things that you need to think about. And again, I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from doing this. I think it's great if it fits your situation, because the opportunities are there for you. If you pick a home that meets all your personal needs. So that's, I think, the first thing that's important. It checks all the boxes of all the personal needs that you and your family want. Location, desirability. I like coming here all the time because, let's face it, we only have so much vacation time.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the challenges is I feel committed to go to this property because I paid a lot of money for it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going off to another state. I'm not going to Europe as much. I'm coming here quite often. And so you need to think about that commitment. But if it checks all your personal boxes, okay, what happens here? Well, you have an asset that's usually in a desirable location, so there's appreciation. So your asset's going to appreciate. So whatever you think about down the road, if you decide to sell or convert this to cash, you have a high probability of having a financial reward that way. Now you have rental income. So we talked about, okay, it's expensive to buy one of these homes. Now if I have good rental income and that offsets my cost of paying for this and maintaining it, then it make it much more affordable. A property that technically I couldn't probably buy on my own based on my spouse's income and my income, but if I combine that with rental income and that takes some of the discretionary money I have, all of a sudden now I can afford this house. So the rental income allows you to take advantage of it. And then Uncle Sam, to some degree, allows you to offset some of these costs because now you're a business. If you qualify as a rental property, not a vacation home, and I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question.
Yeah, the deductions there will be write-offs for you to minimize the taxable income. So there's a lot of things that have to go into that pyramid of this discussion, but I first would start with making sure that all your personal needs are being met, because that seems to be the number one driver while you're considering it. And then the second is then we talk about the financial aspects.
Sure. Can you expand a little bit more on some of the tax implications associated with owning a second home, like property taxes, income taxes, and deductions?
Sure. Well, while I'm a CPA, I have to, for legal reasons, say you need to consult with your financial and tax advisor, but I can summarize some of the key items to think about. So you heard me talk about, are you going to treat this as a vacation home, or are you going to treat this as a rental property? So So a couple things to keep in mind. If it's basically a vacation home or second home, one of the things you have to think about is your limitation on mortgage interest. So after the recent tax law changes, which are subject to potentially be changed at the end of 2025, your primary mortgage and your second mortgage, you can only deduct interest up to a combined $750,000 of indebtedness or mortgage. So based on how much mortgage you have on your primary residence and the second home, which most cases, sometimes these second homes are more expensive than your primary, you can only deduct interest up to $750,000 in combined mortgage. Second, from a property tax standpoint, the government limits the amount of state and local and including property taxes at $10,000 a year. So most people that usually can afford a second home, they're probably making enough money where their property taxes are already capped. So most likely you're not going to get any property tax benefit as a second home. But now you can try to consider flipping gears and say, well, wait a minute, I really want to make this more of a rental property. So what does that look like? So to do that, your personal use limitations, to qualify as a second home first, rather than a rental property, your personal use cannot exceed the greater of 14 days or 10% of the days the home is rented out for fair market value. So, the friend's discount, like here, just pay the cleaning lady fees, you can come down here, stay for free, does not count technically as a rental day. So your break even is 140 days. So if you rent out the home for 200 days, you can use 20 days as personal use and keep it as a vacation home. However, if you disregard all that and you decide, hey, I am going to rent this as an investment property, then the rules change. You're now really operating a going concern. Now, if you rent for fewer than 15 days a year, the rental income does not have to be reported. So it's really considered de minimis. Mm-hmm. However, any expenses associated with that rental, like someone came down and wanted to rent it for 2 weeks, okay, basically you don't have to pick up the income, but you can't write off the expenses. However, if you do treat it as a rental income, then it's a going concern. So basically, all your rents are going to be taxed as ordinary income. It'll get reported on what they call your Schedule E of your tax return. You're allowed to take depreciation. So depreciation is the government's way of saying there are costs, the value of your home, while it might appreciate, there are things in your home that will have to get replaced. So they allow you to write that off over a period of time, and that period of time currently is 27 and a half years. Now, hold on to that a second, because that could come back and bite you down the road if you decide to sell the property.
Yeah.
The other thing is, for most people, this is a side gig, right? This is not their trade. So any income and loss is treated as what they call passive activity income. Well, as long as it's income, the government will gladly take your taxes. Mm-hmm. However, if you have losses, there are limitations on how much loss you can take, and then those losses aren't gone. They get kind of held in a suspense account, and then if you have income down the road, those losses can come back and offset that. And if you decide to sell the property in the future, any of these suspended losses in this account could be used to offset future gains. So you don't lose any losses that you can't take. However, those losses just get suspended for a period of time. So that's one of the negatives if you think, well, geez, I'm just going to run this property and I'll have all these losses because I run all these expenses. Well, that's great, but you're not going to be able to take it because your passive losses get limited by how much you can take.
Wow.
Yeah, so we can't get into all the minutia because it gets a little too tough to do over a podcast. That's why you need to talk to a CPA to run through your personal situation. I will close with this. When you go to sell the property, okay, so say you pay $1 million for this property, and then you sell it for $1.2 million. Okay, well you think, I made $2 million on $200,000 on this property. Well, that is capital gain if you've held this property over a year. However, those depreciation expenses I mentioned to you, it actually reduces your cost basis. So if you paid $1 million, right, And let's just say, again, keep the math simple for our viewers. So say you took $300,000 in depreciation expenses. Well, yes, you did pay $1 million, but as the IRS looks at it, your cost basis is only $700,000. So when you sell the property, the $300,000 of depreciation gets what they call recaptured, and you pay ordinary income on that, and then the $200,000 gain over your original purchase price will get taxed as capital gain. So that always is a surprise to people because they like the fact that I get to get this paper write-off, this depreciation, but they forget that, someday if I sell the property, that rears its head. Now there are, and this is beyond the scope of detail, I just want to mention that it's out there. There's two ways you can kind of avoid this. One, if you die with the property, say this becomes your retirement home, and you decide, hey, I'm going to stop renting it. You can convert it to personal use. All this stuff kind of gets washed away, and then when your kids inherit the property, they get this thing called a step up in basis. So owning the property till you pass can avoid that, especially if you convert it to a personal use asset, which you can. You can take a rental property and then stop treating it as a rental property and treat it as a second home. Again, there are special rules there, but that's something that is allowed. The other thing you can do, let's just say for our viewers, or I should say viewers, listeners, I would say viewers, you decide, hey, we outgrew this home. The home was 2,000 square feet and we need a 4,000 square foot home. There's a thing called a 1031 real estate exchange. So I could take my cost basis of my current property. So the example I gave you, my cost basis was originally $1 million. It dropped us to $700,000. And again, I'm not discussing any improvements or anything. Mm-hmm. There's a $300,000 embedded gain plus any appreciation. I could convert that into a bigger property, and that basis gets transferred over. So I don't get out of it. It just gets suspended into my new property. But during that time, I've avoided paying tax. So for those people that, go in and buy a property and 15 years later they see a bigger, better property, they can do what they call a 1031 exchange. It requires a little bit of gymnastics, which I won't get into today. But those gymnastics, though, if you set it up correctly, will allow you to postpone paying Uncle Sam for a lot longer.
Interesting. So would you, I guess to summarize that, the very long-term play that would make the eventual exit plan of the property make the most sense is probably like transforming it, either selling it and doing maybe a 1031 exchange, or turning it into a personal use property and passing it along to your family that way.
Yeah, that would be a great way to do it. So, again, ideally, if you look at if you can paint a more perfect scenario, is you decide, because I financially cannot, buy this property outright. Mm-hmm. I need help, right? And so obviously we talked about earlier, for those people that have enough money, they're usually not worried about renting it out. They want their home and they want it pristine. They don't want anyone using it. Mm-hmm. What happens in a lot of cases, though, is people go in and say, listen, I'm going to buy a property in a great area that eventually I want to potentially retire to. They're going to fix it up, make it nice, but they're not going to put in A-grade stuff inside because they know it's going to get a lot of traffic. They're personally going to use it a little bit, but the idea is for a period of time, say 15, 20 years, it's a rental property more than a vacation home. Yes, you're allowed to use it a couple weeks or up to 10% of the greater of 14 days or 10% of the days you rent. But that rental income will be used to help you finance the acquisition of your eventual second home. Once that all plays out, and now you're getting closer to retirement, you've got a property that's hopefully paid for. You can take some extra money, fix it the way you want, don't rent it out anymore, and now you have your second home all paid for, and you've used the rental ability of the property in a desirable location to really help finance the acquisition of the property. So yeah, that for many is a good glide path if they're willing, again, to do some of the homework. Just to kind of recap, you got to have your personal checklist. And the best advice is think about buying a home in your area. What is your checklist? Is it in a community that you like? Does it have the amenities? Has it got the kind of people you like to be around with? Because different areas of the country and different cities with even a state all have a different vibe. And you want to make sure that, you've gone there enough to say, you know what, I feel very at home here. That's probably the best expression I can give people to think about. So once you check off all those buttons, then you go down and say, all right, financially, what do I need to think about? Okay, what's, working with a real estate agent, what's the rental ability? What's the kind of rent? How much money do I have to come up with? How much headache is it going to be for me to manage this? Even with a management company, they're going to come to you to make decisions sometimes. They're not going to always do everything for you. They have certain discretionary approval to do certain things like keeping up the property. But for bigger expenses, they're going to go to you, Chelsea, hey, you know what, this fence can't be repaired anymore. It's probably going to cost you $30,000 to fix the fence around the perimeter of the property. Well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of in a rock and a hard place. But make sure you look at the insurance coverages, the legal costs. Please pay attention to probably the most common mistake I see is people don't check out the homeowners association. Because a lot of homeowners association have gotten really fed up with these Airbnbs coming in and having transient people because it affects, in their mind, the safety of their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So the city might be great, the state might be great, it's in a proximity, but you go in there and you don't check out the homeowners rules and you want to do certain things, and all of a sudden you're locked out. And then you've gone through all this gymnastics. So you got to read the fine print. In my opinion, I would not rely on just what the real estate agent is going to say. They are not legal experts. I would have an attorney look at not only the purchase agreement, the homeowners association agreement, and make sure that you're crystal clear on what you can and can't do. Because the worst thing to do is buy a property, find out you can't do the things you want, and then you're like, what do I do now? You got to unwind it? No, you have to turn around and sell it after you've spent all this money to acquire it. And then, make the decision. And again, I think the focus today was to really have you look at buying a second home and having it subsidized really through the rental income process. So we're really looking at this as not so much being a vacation home, but more of a vacation home that's really subsidized by rental income. And so really you're looking at a rental property where you're going to have some personal use there. And then, down the road, you plan on converting it from a rental property to personal use after whatever that time frame is where you feel like, hey, I can take it over.
Yeah,
right?
Interesting. This has been fascinating. So often when I'm meeting with clients, and I know you get this experience too, or a prospective client, one of the big key questions we ask them is, what does a return on life mean to you? And a lot of times we're hearing goals like this where, yes, they have their primary home, but they have a goal to eventually live somewhere warm or somewhere where it feels like they're always on vacation, and they're all striving for that financial independence. And so understanding, yes, there is a lot of detail and minutia that goes into this, but if you're working with a good team, if you've got a competent team of a real estate agent who's an expert in understanding the area and the demographics, an attorney, a financial advisor who also has a good understanding of the business side, and tax planning, if you've got a good team that can help you walk through some of these questions, you can really make an informed decision and get that return on life and achieve that goal that you're aiming for.
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head. You can initiate it, it's your idea and it's your dream, but if you surround yourself with the right people, I always like to say, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. If I surround myself with smarter people, then I'm usually going to probably be in a better position. So you hit the nail on the head. Having a good real estate agent, attorney, a CPA, and your financial advisor, you can really crunch all the details out. A lot of things that we talked about on this podcast, they're all going to mention to you. So never be in a rush, too. That's, think about going to a Disney park, right? Where do they put I call it the tchotchke stand. When you go through and they're selling all the bling, where is it usually at? At the end of a ride, right? You come off the ride and you have to go through the gift store. And, they hit you up to try to buy things. When you're on vacation, you tend to be in a more euphoric mood. And it's like, oh my God, look at that house, I want to get it. And I just caution people to, given the size and the financial commitment and the time commitment, really think through, the non-financial situation first, then the financial, and then kind of put it together and say, all right, does it make sense for my spouse and I? Does it make sense for my family? are we going to utilize the property? Because if you treat it as a rental property, that's less of an issue because it's being rented. But, as I said, we only have so many vacation days. And if you're trying to, go here and there and you don't use the property, if it's being rented out, that's okay. But then down the road, you're going to have to come to the decision is, okay, is this still a place I want to come to? So those are all things that you want to play out. No one's going to have a crystal ball, so don't worry about trying to get 20, 30 years down the road correct. I mean, if you can at least make sure that the reasons why you're going into it makes sense, and for the next 5 to 10 years it seems to make sense, your life's going to change. You might decide, hey, I loved Florida for a while, but you know what, it's gotten overpopulated. I want the mountains more than the ocean. You can always change, but you just got to make sure that there's enough of the check boxes there personally. And then obviously financially, it works with, you and your spouse's income, and that you can kind of make sure, make it a go, because you never want to be financially stressed. We always talk about to our clients, cash flow is like oxygen. You can have great net worth, but if you can't have enough money coming in, you always feel under pressure to pay for things. You feel like you're living check to check, and that's not a way to live.
That's a great way to put it. I think you've covered nearly all of my questions today.
All right. Anything I didn't touch on that you want me to hit?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it.
All right,
Very
great.
extensive.
Well, thanks. Asked a lot of great questions. Hopefully, I didn't get ahead of myself and talk too fast. But this is a common question we get with a lot of our clients. But I think it's time to wrap it up for today. It was a great show. Thank you, Chelsea, for helping me get through all the key areas that we needed to talk about. And remember to like and subscribe to Frank Wealth Insights podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you have any questions, you can feel free to call us at 877-514-9991 or visit us at returnonlifewealth.com. Please tell your friends about our podcast. If you like what you hear, pass it on, have them subscribe. Love to increase our listeners. So thank you again, and have a great start to summer. It's a couple of weeks away.
That's right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been Frank Wealth Insights, the financial and investment podcast from Return on Life Wealth Partners. Your life, your money, your way. Experience financial planning the way it should be, not the way they want it. See how at returnonlifewealth.com. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. This communication expresses the views and opinions of the participants as of the date it was recorded or indicated, and such views are subject to change without notice. This podcast is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be confused for any other purpose. The information contained herein does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of advisory services or an offer to sell or solicitation to buy any securities or related financial instruments in any jurisdiction. This podcast may discuss forward-looking statements that are based on then current beliefs of the participants. Investment advice offered through Planned Financial Services, a registered investment advisor.